Hi, everyone. Thanks, Nicole and Emily and Carmen and everyone at Paco for having me. It's great to be here. So I'm a program manager and accounting advisor for Livelihood Northwest. I've been with the organization for a little over 4 years, and I have a background in supporting small businesses and food co-ops and nonprofits with a variety of support, including bookkeeping, financial tracking and reporting. And I love working with business owners of all types to get a more of a grasp around the numbers and how they can feed into your decision making and your planning. So this presentation today is going to be covering some of the basics and some of the, what more. Like if you've been in business for a while and you have some financial reports, you're like, what do they mean? What can they do for me? Hopefully we'll get a little bit into that as well. So I'm going to get my screen share going of the presentation. Here we go. And we will dive right in. And as Nicole mentioned, we'll have some time at the end for questions and could put questions in the chat as we go as well. For anyone who's not familiar with Livelihood Northwest, just a little introduction. We serve entrepreneurs at all stages of business, all industries throughout Oregon into Southwest Washington. And we started out as the Small Business Outreach Program at Portland State University way back in 1994. We branched off as our own independent nonprofit as Livelihood Northwest in 2019. 2020, we took the opportunity to take our services online, start providing services throughout the state of Oregon, and have continued that ever since. And just this fall, we became the new home of the Oregon Women's Business Center at Livelihood Northwest. So that's a great new resource that's available to anybody. You can become a member of the Oregon Women's Business Center and get access to special learning sessions and other great opportunities. So definitely encourage everybody to go to check that out. We have trainings, workshops like this. We have free open business advising, including accounting advising, which I'll come back to at the end. And some of you may be inspired to take advantage of after the workshop today. We don't do legal advice or tax filing for people. We're not a lender, but we can provide resources and advising around, in those areas and referrals to other resources. Intro to Bookkeeping workshop will be one of the most related workshops that we do that's similar to this content but goes a little bit deeper. So I'll let you know at the end when that next workshop is. 5-week QuickBooks online training series for those of you in or considering bookkeeping in QuickBooks Online, other sessions that you can check out on our website. And this is the overview of our free open business advising, including the accounting advising. These slides will be sent out at the end to everybody as well. So you will have these links that you can follow to go to check out these resources. So that's Livelihood and some of what we do real quick. And then this is what we're going to cover in the tracking your business finances, using your financial information for decision making. So basics of just tracking and organizing. It's really all about organization. Overview of the main financial report that organizing our business income and expenses and cost of goods sold gives us, which is the profit and loss statement or income statement, how to understand that and use that. And then for those of you that are considering a bookkeeping system or software or considerations around working with an outside professional bookkeeper, we'll talk about some options for that. And of course, come back to those resources for learning more and going further. So very basics, there could be, a variety of people at different stages in business and in the room or getting, watching this afterwards from maybe you've been doing it for a while or you are at idea phase or you're a startup. So the place to start always, or sometimes maybe if you've been in a business for a while and there's still some things you need to come back to and clean up and get more organized with. So making sure you have a separate business checking account and are running all of your transactions through that account. All your deposits from your business are going into there. All your expenses are coming out of it. That separation is really important for clarity and tax purposes and being able to generate business reports. Saving receipts. So just having transactions running through a business account is not technically enough to justify it as a business expense. You need some form of backup documentation. A bookkeeping system will often have like an app that you can take pictures of receipts and attach them into your system, or just, file folder, whatever works. I know that organizing paperwork is one of the challenges for all of us in our lives. There's lots of different ways to do it, whatever is easy and works best for you. But in order to feel confident and lower your risk in making sure that you can get a tax write-off for a tax deductible business expense, you want to have a receipt in addition to your bank statements. Startups, very common to be using some personal funds to get going with a business. So if that's the case, keep track of it. Spreadsheet's great. One of the tools we'll talk about at the end is just a basic spreadsheet tracker. You can use that to be like, okay, I spent $100 to register my business name with the Oregon Secretary of State. I didn't have my business bank account yet. I didn't have any revenue yet. So I used personal funds. You want to still track that. It's still really helpful and can be used down the road. And just that final reminder, keeping business and personal separate. So the way this works with most businesses in the early phases is that you are paying yourself with owner's draw. So you're depositing business revenue into a business checking account. You're setting aside some of that for tax purposes. You're setting aside some of that, keeping some of that in the account for upcoming business expenses that you can pay those expenses out of the business account. What's left over is kind of what you're working with for owner's pay. So you would transfer from business checking to personal checking as owner's draw, as opposed to paying for personal expenses directly out of that business account. You can also write yourself a check, but just as a reminder of like, yes, at least as soon as possible, you want it. The business is, if it's going to be beyond a hobby, it can often be a passion project, but generally the goal is to be able to make a living for yourself from the business. So attention to paying yourself and to separation of business and personal transactions. Accounting, so big, lots of words and different terms that get thrown around in this realm and in many areas of business. But accounting is basically about organization. So we're taking data, we're taking financial transactions, such as a deposit of cash or checks or electronic deposit into a bank account, withdrawals in different forms. Maybe there's loan funds. So that's a particular kind of financial transaction. It's not business revenue, but it's something that you track in an accounting system. So that lives in a particular place in an accounting system. It's a liability. It's money that's owed to others. So if you think about that example, you're like, I want to know at any given point in time, how much money do I owe on that loan? How much am I paying in interest? So an accounting system is really helpful for knowing that you have that loan, seeing it, and be like, oh yeah, I need to make a note of some kind of how much I paid this year in interest, so I know what I paid at the principal. What's the balance of that business loan now, today? So, example of an accounting transaction and a system that can help us to organize that information. We are looking for organizing it all in a way that will help us create reports, which we'll see some examples of later. There's two basic purposes: taxes and decision making, which is the more fun part. Bookkeeping, accounting, financial tracking can feel intimidating for lots of different reasons, including whatever ideas we have, baggage around money and our family stories, and just like math trauma can come up for a lot of people. So this caveat here is like, it's not really about math. The systems are doing it all for us for the most part. It's about organizing. So you can think of this as like literal buckets of different kinds of activities, folders, and you're just like, okay, I'm putting this over here and I'm putting this over here. So think of it as, we all have ways we organize things in our lives, and a bookkeeping system is organizing financial information. Back to that last one. Unfortunately, even if we have a great software program, it's not going to do all the work for us. This is our little saying of garbage in, garbage out. So if you are not um, giving your system good information, your reports are not going to be accurate and useful. So there needs to be some kind of attention to keeping on top of it. There's some time involved. So, a restaurant is going to have quite a lot of transactions every day that they're open, buying ingredients, deposits of cash sales and a point of sale system sales. So there's lots of ways we can automate it, make it faster, but we do have to be in our bookkeeping or financial tracking system fairly regularly. Regularly can be daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, depending on how many transactions we're talking about, the volume of it all, and how well automated things are. But you've got to be doing some work, or a bookkeeper that you're paying is going to be doing some work, and you're still communicating with that bookkeeper to tell them, oh yeah, that deposit, going back to the loan example, wasn't sales, it was a loan. Or, oh, that was a payment on an invoice. We need to make sure that that payment gets matched to that invoice that I have, so that it's not still showing as if that customer still owes me. So lots of communication around like what happened, and how do we record it accurately so that the reports will be accurate. If you wait till the end of the year, or like right now, let's say we're doing all of our bookkeeping, all of our financial organizing for 2024, just because, oh, I need to file taxes pretty soon. I'm working on that now, or I'm getting my information to a tax preparer. You can get the basics done. Like you can get your total business revenue, total business expenses, net profit after subtracting expenses, file your taxes, but you're not able to get that rich, useful data as you go throughout the year to plan proactively. So generally, at least once a month is when we want to be going through our receipts and our bank statements, or looking at our bookkeeping, or communicating with our bookkeeper, so that we can get an accurate, useful, meaningful report, and then be like, oh yeah, I spent a little bit more than I planned to on marketing last month, so I'm going to do less next month. Or, ooh, it looks like I have a cash flow crunch coming up. My summer is really slow. I need to be saving up some money so that I can have that in the bank for the fall, for instance. Already getting into some of the whys there, this kind of bigger picture. So we're talking some about the how, like what does it mean to keep track of our business financial information? This is kind of like, what's the motivation? Like, what's the deeper reason why we are doing all of this? And I think that the decision making, the strategic questions are what can be most helpful for an entrepreneur to feel, move through whatever barriers or hesitations or like challenges you might have around it, to be like, okay, this is something that I'm going to do and I want to do so that I can get this information and use it. So pretty much every business is going to have questions around pricing. How much do I charge? The cash flow that I kind of gave that example of, like, oh, I have some seasonality to my business. What do I need to be planning for this like big expense that I have every year? Or I know I'm going to get paid in a few months, but I have insurance to pay now. Or like I feel like I should have more cash in the bank. Where is it going? Understanding really clearly, what does it cost you to produce your product or provide a service? That's our cost of goods sold or cost of services, particular kinds of expenses that many businesses have, although not all of them. But we want to be able to figure out, like, if my ingredient costs are going up, are my prices keeping up with that? We've had examples of like when people sit down and really figure out all of the costs going into a product, that they might not even be breaking even on certain items. So being able to see that really clearly on your financial statements really helps. And then sales channels, breaking it out by a little more detail. If you're doing both a retail store and you have catering, or you have wholesale accounts, online sales, rather than just having everything lumped into one general sales business income category. Most businesses have like 2 to 5 that they want to track, or maybe you're considering getting into wholesale and you've just been doing farmers markets so far. having those categories of income, these buckets, these different types of categories and in information that we can be seeing on a report is really helpful for this decision making. So just some examples, questions you might be considering, and none of our financial statements or our bookkeeping systems are going to answer these questions. They won't tell you how much you should charge, but they will give you information that will help you, maybe your business advisor, when you're sitting down and looking at everything together, it will help you to answer these questions. With that, we're going to get into some basics of this profit and loss statement or income statement. So some of you will be more familiar with this than others. Have seen them before. You've got them for your business. We're going to start with seeing a big version of it, of like a full year, month side by side, and then we're going to zoom in a little bit on some different sections of it, and talk through how to interpret it, a basic sense of like, what is this report telling us and how can we start to use it. Before we get there, and just like some reasons why we might be looking at this report, it gives us the clearest picture of our business revenue, those costs of goods sold that I mentioned, and regular ongoing general operating expense or overhead. The taxes, so we don't pay taxes on our total business revenue. We pay it on what's left after all of those expenses. So if you're calculating that as you go through the year, you can more accurately do your quarterly estimated taxes or be setting aside savings as you go. And just making sure that you have those good records of those expenses so that you can document them and feel confident in claiming them. It's called a profit or loss, and it could be either or both, in different months. Are we making money? Is the business bringing in more revenue than it's going out in expenses? And then oftentimes, if you are going to seek financing, apply for a loan, whether from a traditional bank or from a community lender, they're going to ask for a profit and loss statement from the past, often for projections for like, what do you anticipate your profits will look like in the future. So having a bookkeeping system helps you with both. It generates like historical data. What did we make in 2024? We can feed that into planning, projections, forecasting for what if last year expenses were this much, and based on assumptions about I'm opening a second location, here's what I can anticipate my expenses and my income will be in the next 12 to 24 months. So more reasons why we might want to or need to have a profit and loss statement. So our sample business is Cammie's Cupcakes, and this is going to be that month side by side. We'll see a lot of numbers on the screen, so the deep breaths before we look at that, and then we'll go through it in more detail. So this is example numbers just to get a sense of like what this could look like, some different categories. So that left-hand column are our categories, those buckets. We have two examples of revenue streams that I've mentioned: retail sales, catering sales, and the income. Two examples of cost of goods sold broken out, and then general business expenses. So you see that column on the left is the categories, each month side by side. So what was our revenue in January, February, March, and then expenses in each of those months, bottom line, net profit or loss, so the difference between the two. So we're going to go through in more detail how that breaks down in a little bit of a summary. This is those main sections of the profit and loss statement without numbers, just to kind of be able to think through a little bit more what the format is and how to interpret it. So income, revenue, sales, could be called all of those, but whatever money is coming in from the product you're selling or the service you're providing. So not those loan funds, not other like personal funds invested in the business, but the business generating revenue. That's that first line, our first section. The cost of goods sold or cost of sales, which maybe in the end in questions, we can get into more examples of like, what would this count as cost of goods for my business or not? But the basic idea is that this is an expense that you can tie directly to the revenue. You wouldn't incur it if you didn't have revenue. So one of our examples is like with a catering, and maybe you have to rent some equipment. You rent a special like set of tools and a booth and some outdoor tables in order to have this catering event go well. You make the money from the catering event. That rental expense is cost of goods sold. So you subtract that cost to get your gross profit, and that's what's left after you have accounted for all the expenses you incurred as part of generating the revenue. I know that is just one little example, and some of them can be more subtle, or there's some judgment calls involved about when do I count this as COGS or not. But it's most clear often for people to kind of wrap their mind around like a food-based example of like I have to buy the ingredients. In the Cammy's example, you have to buy the flour, you have to buy the wrappers that the cupcakes go into. Those examples of like packaging or like what goes away with the customer, they walk away with it. So all associated with being able to even like make any money at all from these cupcakes, we have to spend some money to make the cupcakes, or to make a handbag. We have to buy materials. Maybe we have to hire a contractor to do certain tasks. Gross profit, what's left over after those expenses that have to be incurred in order to make a sale. So income minus cost of goods sold equals gross profit, kind of like high level profit. From that, out of gross profit is what we have left to pay for everything else, which could be your business, space, rental for your a retail business. It could be your insurance costs. It could be that annual business license. These are fixed costs that are things you have to incur just to be in business, regardless of whether or not you make a sale. So my ingredient costs for this cupcake business go up and down in proportion to sales. My rent expenses are the same every month. So that's one comparison to help think between fixed operating overhead expense versus the cost of goods sold expense. So sales minus COGS equals gross profit. Gross profit minus general expenses or overhead equals net profit. That's that bottom line. What's really left over after everything is said and done, that's the number that we would pay taxes on. And for most businesses, that's what we would be paying ourselves from as well, if you're not on salary for the business, which would be a different structure. So most businesses in the early phases are taking owner's draw, paying themselves out of what's left from net profit. So that's the basic structure. And then we see, again, the month by month columns. You can get it summarized in all kinds of different ways. A profit and loss is always a period of some time in the past. It could be a single month. It could be a quarter. Like this one is Q1, January, February, March, or it could be a whole year. The more time that's included, the more meaningful in some ways, but also drilling into a single month can be really helpful. Seeing the full year with the month side by side helps us see seasonality. We see any fluctuation in sales and costs over time, and it helps us see if an expense that's usually $100 is suddenly $1,000. Like, what's going on? What happened in that month? If everything's summarized all together, if for the whole year we lose some of that detail. But it's good to look at it both ways, the summary and the months broken out. So this is that same Q1, but zoomed in with the Cammy's Cupcakes example. So we see the retail sales and the catering sales in each of those months. So clearly retail is like bigger, at least certainly in this period of time. But it's still maybe Cammy's just getting started with doing catering and just seeing what that's like. We also see, that January is a pretty darn low sales month, at least compared even to these February, March months. Cost of goods sold, so ingredients, packaging. Again, you don't have to split it out in that detail. The IRS doesn't care, but you might care if like you're really trying to focus in on your ingredient costs. most likely for pricing, you're going to have some separate spreadsheet where you're really getting into the minute details of like every single cupcake to the cent. Here's what it cost me to make it. But this is at least, something beyond like all the general cost of goods sold, seeing ingredients packaging broken out. Sometimes we say one of the reasons why you might want a different category is that you would make a different decision to change that number. So like in this case, flour cost is like the biggest thing to track, and you're like, I'm trying to get it down. You want to see that separately from bags, boxes, utensils, etc. So just an example of like, why do we have this detail? Is it worth it to us to track it? Especially if it means like splitting an expense, a receipt into multiple parts. So, all right, we have income in these two different sales channels. COGS, that's the abbreviation for the cost of goods sold or cost of services, totaled up here. And then our gross profit. So we can see, let's look at January, gross income, about 3,200 minus the COGS of 780 gets us that 2,471. So this 2,471 number is like, okay, in January, that's what we made after our cost of goods sold expenses. We have general operating expense to pay. Hopefully we have something left over. If not, hopefully we have some savings in the bank to cover, which is what did happen for Cammy's in January. This is zoomed in on the expense section, so we don't see the months there, but it's still January, February, March, April, May. These are some examples of very basic expense categories that you may have that map pretty well to the tax categories. Each business is different. And again, as we were just talking about, how do you know when you need a category for it? Like, what's the right category? There's a lot of it depends answers in that. You start with some of these basic categories like advertising, meals and entertainment. Those are on the tax form. But you may well have a particular category that you want to create and track that nobody else or like, only your industry has. So we don't have a lot of examples of that here, but you get to track what's meaningful and useful to you. So, this is a restaurant. We have restaurant supplies. That wouldn't be the case for a consulting business. They might have, all kinds of things, examples that we could talk about as far as like, what category should I have? Where does this go? How many categories should I have? We're kind of having a balance between useful, meaningful, and not getting too long and overwhelming and too detailed. We want it to be manageable. Ideally, you're going to see it all in one page. So some considerations. We can also have, in some bookkeeping systems, sub accounts. So we can like have, I'm having a particular like social media Google Ads campaign, and I want to track that in detail. I might create a subcategory of advertising, and then I could see it broken out in that detail. I could also see it rolled up into a total advertising expense. So here are our regular expenses, their total, and then our net. So I mentioned that we do have a loss in January. So COGS plus expenses exceeded the income from that month. It doesn't necessarily mean that the bank account is negative. Overall, this year is profitable. Hopefully the prior year is profitable, and there was some cash in the bank going into this year. So there's some things in the Intro to Bookkeeping workshop, we go into more kind of a case study with like, what was going on and what were the factors, and are there different considerations around using this information to interpret what happened and how we could plan for the future. Here we are back to the general overall summary here. I will just point out a little bit of the seasonality. So we're starting at just 3,000 in retail sales in January, gets up to 22,023 in the summer. So Cammy's has a clear seasonal picture with retail sales. Catering sales looks a little bit different. So highest sales month for catering is here in November and December. So if we had just this gross income line totaled up, we wouldn't get that nuance of what's going on with these different types of activities that the business is doing. Maybe the opportunities there of like, okay, we were doing a lot of holiday events, and those worked out really well. And maybe we can do more of a Valentine's Day catering in February next year. And then the one other thing to look at with January is the repairs and maintenance. So we have this, we've got a couple of repairs and maintenance expenses, January, October. So, could be looking at January in detail of like, why, we know it's a low sales month, or maybe I take some time off. Always a good thing to do. But yeah, would there be a way to avoid this loss, or is it just something that we're planning for, that we know it's low sales? We've got this oven repair we have to do every year, and we have to shut down the store for half a day. So maybe it makes sense to do it at a low sales time, so we're not losing out on the sales of those customers. That if we did it in July, we'd be losing out on more sales than if we did it in January. So just trying to get at some ways of like, we're looking at the screen of numbers. What is it telling us? How do we drill into this? What could we do with this information? All right, so that's our profit and loss overview. Hopefully makes note of questions that we can come to at the end. This section will be about bookkeeping systems and software, and we'll talk a little bit about working with an outsourced bookkeeper as well as we go throughout these options. So in order to create that lovely profit and loss, we had to have some kind of bookkeeping system. There are a variety of options, considerations around what makes sense for you and your business, and comparisons, pros and cons between those different options. Mostly at Livelihood, we focus on two, and there's a lot of the partner organizations that we work with also might recommend these, but there are many, many others. So QuickBooks Online, one of the most common systems out there, well known, and pretty much every bookkeeper you could meet is going to be familiar and experienced in QuickBooks Online. Wave is a lower cost and even has a free option that covers the basics well. So it's one of the reasons why we're like, if you're looking for a free option or a less expensive option, you might consider Wave. So we'll do some comparisons between those two, and then also talk about free basic tracking. So this training is, tracking your business finances. There's options to do that don't require a full, robust bookkeeping software solution. So, a spreadsheet tracker is a good tool as well. We'll talk a little bit about that. So just starting with comparing between QuickBooks and Wave, they both are going to just do the basics of tracking income and expenses in categories that you can customize. That's important to me. We talked about, we want to be able to have those different revenue streams. We want to be able to have different expense categories that are unique to the business. Some software out there will not let you edit and customize. So that's what I'm looking for. The things I'm looking for in a bookkeeping system is, can I create a new category? Can I edit a category so that it's most useful to me? What I see in a report is useful and meaningful in that way. Generate reconciled financial reports. So reconciliation, another accounting term. Well, it's a general term, but in the accounting term, it means that we are getting our bookkeeping system, our reports to match up, to align with what our bank statement says. So also another thing I'm looking for in any bookkeeping system is, does it have a formal reconciliation tool where I can do that really clearly to say at any given point in time, let's say the end of the year, December 31st, does what my bookkeeping system says was in each of these bank accounts, balance on this loan, balance on this credit card, does that number match to what my statement says? A bookkeeping system should have a tool to help you do that, and that lets us make sure that everything is accurate, nothing is missing, nothing is duplicated. Errors can creep in, that garbage in, garbage out. So we want to check and be sure to have the most confidence in our reports that we're using good information. So reconciliation tool, and that looks different in different systems, and they might use the term differently, but the way I'm describing it, we would be looking for something where you can enter in an ending balance off of a bank statement. So we are looking for that tool, and we're looking for the ability to run a profit and loss basic, also a balance sheet. We are not going to look at an example of that today, but it's another report that gives you different information. Like I talked about how we had that loss in January, but we are presuming that we had some money in the bank. We don't see that money in the bank. Where we would see that would be on the balance sheet that shows us balances as of a given point in time in a bank account, on a credit card, on a loan. Also things like accounts receivable, what money is owed to me that doesn't appear here, maybe on this report, on the profit and loss, what money do I owe to others potentially, other things that live on the balance sheet. So those are reasons why you might want to know about it. Also could be asked for by a bank if you're applying for a loan. And then cash flow, one more report that can be great when you're getting into financial analysis and cash flow planning. That's a report that a bookkeeping system, many of them can and should be able to generate. So those are the big three: profit and loss, P&L, balance sheet, statement of cash flows. Those are the three reports that we ask participants, clients in our cohort programs to make sure that their bookkeeping system can generate. So I would recommend any business owner that is especially planning to grow and scale, has a system or has a plan to get into a system or work with a bookkeeper where they can get those three reports. Creating and sending invoices, you can do an invoice in an email or all kinds of ways. You can write it on a piece of paper, but many bookkeeping systems are also invoicing solutions and payment solutions. So you could send an invoice through it. A customer could pay you through your bookkeeping system. And then payroll, can make sense to do that integrated with your bookkeeping system or separate. But both Wave and QuickBooks do have the ability to do those things. I wouldn't necessarily recommend payroll in Wave, but it can do it. So a little bit more on QuickBooks Online. It is online. Pretty much all the systems that we are looking at these days are cloud-based systems. If anybody's interested in the old days, I'm happy to tell you more about desktop and other software from the past, but pretty much we're focused on a system you can access from anywhere. They generally are going to have a phone and a tablet app. I mentioned that ability to take pictures of receipts. QuickBooks Online is starting at $35 a month. It's always half off to start. So significant, but it's also, if you think of it in terms of other business expenses that you have, it's something you can budget and plan for, so some monthly software fee. And there's just different considerations around like, what are the costs of doing business? It goes up from there. So there's some features that come with the more expensive software, as we have found with lots of other software that we pay for, like, oh, that feature I really want comes with the next level up. Any bookkeeper, like I said, will know how to use this, and you can invite a bookkeeper directly to a system. Or maybe if you are already starting out with working with a bookkeeper, they might manage the QuickBooks Online file and then invite you to view it. Some, if you're working with some bookkeepers, some of them are like, I do everything and I send you the reports. It's great to be able to have direct access to your system if you can, to be able to get in, answer a question, run a report on your own, not have to rely on a bookkeeper to be sending you reports all the time. Although it's nice if they here's the set of final reconciled reports. So generally, if you're using QuickBooks Online or have a bookkeeper using QuickBooks Online, you should be able to have direct access to it. And it's good practice as a business owner to be familiar with your system and feel confident in asking questions, asking for things from your bookkeeper, like, hey, I would like to start tracking my income in also wholesale. I'm working on adding wholesale. Can we add that category? So that's the kind of thing that if you are paying a bookkeeper to do everything for you, building that confidence in asking for what you want and knowing what the system can do so that you can, ask those questions, make those requests from a professional bookkeeper. You can also invite a tax preparer directly to your bookkeeping system. That can make it really easy. So generally easy to find help, well-known, common system. Integrations, it can integrate directly with Square, PayPal, Shopify. I have mixed feelings about how well they work, especially for business owners who are doing their own books, but it's possible and it can make some things easier. The fee is a little bit higher starting price than some other options out there, including Wave. Gotta be connected to the internet. can be a little bit overwhelming. I think it just requires some training, some support, which we offer. There's lots of trainings and resources out there for learning QuickBooks Online, and some bookkeepers will do training as well. So with Wave, we often recommend it for startups, sole proprietors, service-based businesses. You don't have a lot of complicated transactions. It can be a really great option. They still have a free version. Anybody who's using Wave who used to have it, everybody was free. There was no paid option. They just introduced this last year. It's just been a little bit less than a year. But it's $16 a month, so about half the price, a little bit less than QuickBooks Online. Not as many people are familiar with it, not as many bookkeepers are familiar with it, but Wave does have a network of Wave bookkeepers. If you want to pay somebody to do it, you can connect with somebody through their site. If you're like, I want to use QuickBooks, but I want to pay less money to start, you can't easily get your data out of Wave and into QuickBooks. It's not going to be a seamless transition. So generally, if you're like, in a year, I want to be in QuickBooks, probably just bite the bullet and start in QuickBooks just to have everything there from the beginning, most likely. But if you're not sure, like, I think I can get by where I'm starting from a spreadsheet and that's working fine, but I want a little bit more functionality, Wave can be a really great option. Free, lower cost, easier to learn. I think it's intuitive. There's still some things that are helpful to get a little bit of training on, but they have some good help pages. I've done training and setup in Wave with a lot of businesses as well, and I'm going to be working on a recorded video series. So resources for that. Fewer reports. Because I work in both QuickBooks and Wave, I'm really familiar with like, oh, I wish Wave could do this that QuickBooks can do, but sometimes vice versa, actually. There's some things about Wave that I really like and even prefer. And most of the, quibbles I have with Wave are minor that can be addressed in different ways. That said, your business might outgrow it if you're planning to grow and scale, if you're planning to add payroll. I don't think the Wave payroll is a great option. And again, fewer people are familiar with it. So like getting tax help or bookkeeper help might be more limited. A couple other options. These are not bookkeeping systems and that they can't generate automatically necessarily all of those financial reports or do invoicing or record loan balances very well, but they are options for basic tracking of business income and expenses and creating a profit and loss, the basic report that we would need for taxes and for most of our decision making. So there's a simple P&L app, and then there's just Google Sheet templates, of which there are many, and there's a link that will be in the slide handout to one example. So Simple P&L was created by local bookkeeper Megan Keys. It's a free app. There's a $10 PDF guide you can purchase. It works well if you have all of your transactions running through a business checking. You can download them into a spreadsheet. You can upload them into this app, and then you just assign them to categories. And I've worked with people to do that for like a whole year. They don't have a lot of transactions. Everything went through the one account, or they can like merge them together into a spreadsheet and get through the basics in, maybe a few hours, get a profit and loss, file your taxes. So it spits out a profit and loss in a Google Doc. The categories are preset categories. That's one limitation. Only one income category. It's more about like organizing information for taxes and for a basic profit and loss. Maybe you're like, oh, I'm applying for this loan or this grant that's asking me for a P&L. I haven't had a bookkeeping system, but I did have a business checking account. Everything's in there. This could be a free, fast way to get you to that goal as quickly as possible. And then you can talk about, maybe I want to get set up in Wave or QuickBooks for this year. The one challenge that I've found with it is that, like with some spreadsheets and apps, importing, it cares about date formatting very precisely. So if you're having issues with that, it's probably about date formatting. And if you had like a checking account and a credit card, it can't do both of those unless you merge them together in the spreadsheet. Simple P&L app, one option. These are the categories it uses. So another example, kind of like we saw in the Cammy's Cupcakes profit and loss. I like that this has the descriptions, and that PDF from Megan has more detail on these descriptions and how do you use them. So if you're looking for like, what's a tax deductible business expense? This is one list that will kind of give you that answer. Like what is travel, expense, or, meals and entertainment. So descriptions here of what some of those basic tax categories are. spreadsheet template. It can be Excel or it can be in Google Sheet. It's going to have formulas that add things up for you, does the math for you like a bookkeeping system. It might have month by month tabs or a total for the year. You can download transactions from online banking from this as well, and then kind of like convert it into a spreadsheet template, or you can enter transactions manually. I gave the example of like when you're starting a business and you just had like, you paid for your annual business license and some insurance and like some office supplies. Maybe you just have like 10 transactions for a whole like year. You could just enter them manually. It'll add them up in the different categories and have a profit and loss tab. Here's the link that you'll get in the handout for how to get to this web page where you can download an example that we like of a really good spreadsheet template. Free, easily available. Pretty much any account tax preparer will have some kind of like spreadsheet organizer that they might send to their clients, which is very similar to this. You can customize it. You can add different categories. You get to practice with spreadsheets, which is useful for all kinds of purposes. I mentioned how even if you're using a great bookkeeping system, you might still have your pricing worksheet in an Excel spreadsheet. I have that on the con as well, because some people are intimidated by spreadsheets or Excel or just aren't familiar with it yet. So, it's a learning opportunity if that's an edge for you. If you have a lot of transactions, this is going to get overwhelming and time consuming fast. So you might be motivation, like, okay, next year, again, I want this to be automated more in a software program. And then formula errors. So spreadsheets, they tally things up for you. They do the math. If you edit those formulas, it's going to give you errors. So you have to have at least enough knowledge with a spreadsheet to know what does a formula look like and how to not change the formula or to get it changed back to keep it working correctly. Here's a link that will be also, I think, clickable from the slides when they get sent out to comparisons to yet more options, but don't get overwhelmed by the plethora out there. Here's just a few examples of like, oh, if you're looking into something else, why you might consider yet more potential options. FreshBooks really have beautiful invoices that convert really easily from setting an estimate to a potential client and then converting that to an invoice. I like that feature. Zoho is free and does everything you could possibly imagine. It is overwhelming to me. But if you're tech savvy, you might want to give it a try. And then Xero has some interesting, useful features, like maybe you have 3 different people, not all Wave and QuickBooks are more limited in terms of like how many users you can add at different price points. So Xero allows for more users all at once. At the basic level, I forget exactly how much that is in the monthly fee, but both FreshBooks and Xero, I think, are like start around like maybe 20-ish, so less than QuickBooks, maybe a little bit more than Wave. Option to start with that free tracker, especially at the beginning. Think about whether you are going to be outsourcing your bookkeeping or want to in the future. That could drive you a certain direction or another. What kind of training do you need? How confident do you feel in doing your own books, or like learning from a YouTube video, or getting access to some other form of training or support? What are the reports that you need versus what you want? The more expensive versions of QuickBooks come with like budget to actuals reports, which are awesome. That's more at the like $99 a month price point. Features that matter really to you. I worked with one person in Wave who's like, I really need to be able to link to PayPal, and it doesn't do that. So that's a consideration. And finally, bottom line, best booking system is the one that you're going to use. So I definitely encourage giving some thought to like, what's realistic for me? Am I the one doing this? Or like, am I going to be outsourcing this? But yeah, having and paying, especially for like an expensive software, and then getting to the end of the year and we're like, I haven't been keeping up on this at all. That's not what we're going for. So, if it's a spreadsheet, if it's free spreadsheet tracker, great. Like get the basics done, get everything added up, and then, move from there. All right, we have made it to the end here, basically. So you can come meet with me or my wonderful colleague, Nancy, free 50-minute online meeting to talk more about any of this stuff, or look at, if you're in QuickBooks or Wave or another system, we can use the screen share tool in Zoom to look at your reports together, like answer a question. We can do 1 or 2 free meetings, both for that quick questions, assessment for if you might be interested and qualify for more in-depth support. And then the Intro to Bookkeeping workshop, we would be some of this content plus a little bit more and some more time for, questions and going into detail. We're next going to offer that on March 13th. 5-week QuickBooks online training series with if you're working with a business advisor at Paco, could get a referral most likely to be able to do that for $100. It comes with 3 months of individual one-to-one support in addition to the group classes. So either you're already in QuickBooks or you are for sure, I'm going to get set up and start using QuickBooks. That could be a great option. So we're starting really soon. I have a few spots left in my winter series. We'll offer it again in June. And anybody who's in that startup phase, you want some more resources around just basics of getting going with more of the things around registering your business and license and setting up a bank account. We have a free workshop on the 27th of February. Okay, that is the Tracking Your Business Finances. I'll stop my share here and we will have some time for questions.
We do have some. A quick one. Does Wave integrate with Shopify?
It does not. Yeah. So if that's an important feature for you, you're probably going to be looking at QuickBooks. Yeah. Wave does not really have any of those integrations. So Intuit, the maker of the QuickBooks software, is like big company, lots of partnerships with all kinds and always adding more integrations. So yeah. And the Shopify integration, when you have those kinds of integrations though with QuickBooks Online, it's often where I'm already recommending people, like if you're going to use that and that's important to you, you probably want to pay a bookkeeper to do it well, because the integrations are great and powerful and they can go awry and just make things worse. I have just seen that too many times. So it's a good tool to have, but each tool that you have has some caveats to it.
Okay, the next question from Ely. In order to track different sales categories, will you help us set up the account in the chart of accounts? Would you help us review our current chart of account and give recommendations?
Yes, absolutely. I would love to. Yeah, that would be a great use of time in an open accounting advising meeting. Whether we might be actually like using screen share to look at your system, or if you wanted to like email it to me ahead of time and I could go like, oh yeah, what's your goals with your business? What do you want to be tracking? What maybe, yeah, there's always things in the chart of accounts that could be like cleaned up or consolidated or modified. And it's a good thing to do if you've been in business for a while. You started out with a list of categories, but things are changing, or like you adding on something new in your business. It's always good to go through line by line, like, oh, now we need to add this, or this no longer makes sense. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk that through.
And I put your email in the
Oh,
chat.
great. Yeah,
Do you
thank
have
you.
a link for what you just mentioned?
The
Personal?
open accounting advising.
Yes.
Yeah, I can put that in the chat for sure. Let me get that pulled up. Yeah, if anybody wants to schedule right now,
Yes. It's like, why not?
get it done. Yeah, so that link will go to open accounting advising, schedule a meeting, and if you do, you can choose me or you can do next available, or Nancy is great and is also our Spanish speaker. Some.
Any other questions? Is everyone good? Well, if not, I just posted in the chat. We're having another webinar next month. It's going to be precision marketing. And I put in the link there if you wanted to register your spot or reserve your spot. But Jocelyn, thank you so much for being our speaker today and teaching us all about how to track our business finances.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always fun to be with different group of people. Yeah, hope to see some of you in open accounting advising or the Intro to Bookkeeping workshop. If anybody's interested in that QuickBooks training, shoot me an email as soon as you can, and we can always just hop on the phone to cover if it would be a good fit and if we can get you a subsidy for it.
Thank you so much. Well, if there's no more questions, we can give you back 4 minutes for your day. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.